Wired Axcess.
We'll do it live.
Wired Axcess.
Do it live.
Wired Axcess.
We'll do it live.
Wired Axcess.
Welcome to another Hurrdat Productions of the Wired Axcess podcast. I'm your host, DJ K Dub Omaha. To my left, I have one of the recruit experts here in the local area, David Gardner. To his left, we have the head coach of Omaha Bryan Bears, Galen Gullie. And then I got my co-host, Brian Southworth of Wired Training. Fellas, welcome to the show. Man, am I stoked to talk about from where it began to where we are today, especially with high school sports. It's one of my favorite things. But I think, Brian, you're a guy who knows how this goes. When you play for a team and then you get to live a dream later and try to coach that team, kind of changes the aspect and gives you more pride to be that coach. But of course, we got to start. You're graduated from Omaha Bryan.
Yep.
Talk about one of the biggest struggles you experienced as a player and one of the biggest things that you feel you overcame and showed people that you were the man.
The biggest struggles I think was, going to Bryan. Bryan was, it's kind of like a small town. It's a little bit different. I mean, it's kind of out the way of everyone, even though we're considered, Omaha Public Schools is in Bellevue. But it was just trying to get guys there. We had some friends who weren't neighborhood kids from Bryan, and we're trying to get guys there. But we overcame that with the, with the neighborhood kids that we got, from Telly Mason to Ethan Montavo, who was a neighborhood kid. Jake Maslow was a neighborhood kid, and then end up getting DK Augustine with Sam Bongelman and Tyree. And then we pretty much made the most of it and kind of, create our own pathway, create our own way for each other. So.
And when you're talking about your high school, what was the furthest you guys made it? I know you got in the playoffs.
Yep. So my sophomore year, we lost in the semifinals. Junior year, we lost in the semifinals. And then our senior year, we lost in the state championships.
And who was that verse?
Central.
We all know Central.
Yeah.
We all know so what he's telling you right here, and this is the hardest thing with Omaha public schools in different areas, is you're counting on the kids in the area that want to come to Bryan.
Yes.
So that's the first hard part and hurdle.
Right.
You get through that, you get to play the top team, Central, who was year after year after year dynasty. What did you feel in that game that you can take and add to the fire of what you do today?
It's just, where we came from, and no disrespect to Central, but they were a really good school. I mean, they just had talent just coming from anywhere. And, Coach Behrens had that talent and made the most of it. And it was a really good coach. But, for us, we kind of play with the chip on our shoulder and, something to prove. When a lot of people hear about Omaha Bryan, they kind of give us the weird look a little bit. But, we put Bryan on the map for a long time. And a lot of people before us, like Matt Colliver and Brandon Magruder, they paved the way for us. And, we just had to try to, take it to the next level.
And of course, David, you were a part of just watching some of these athletes grow up and come through the system. What's some things that you remember about those Bryan teams, especially how they finished on his senior year of getting to that championship?
Well, I remember Coach Gullie specifically, was just a great player, great 3-point shooter, good at getting to the basket. DK Augustine, he's your assistant now, right?
Yep.
So there was just a good core of people. Of coach, you had Coach Cannon at the time, which I'm sure he probably attributes some success to. So there was his teams are always well coached. So you look at the pace of play, the ability to get to the basket, just athletic young men. And I was telling Kendall when I was texting him a story, because I remember that at the time you had got injured too, going to that state championship, right? Yeah, I thought that was kind of a cool story. I don't know if you want to share.
That was a really cool story. We were playing against Creighton Prep in the semifinals, and I'd made some move, and one of their guards ended up reaching, and we kind of bumped heads a little bit. I kind of went out for a little bit, and then we went into overtime is when I came back, ended up winning that game. And then we end up watching film after the semifinals game. We go to Spaghetti Works for a team dinner. Next thing you know, I just felt my eye just swell up, and it was just closed shut. And then I remember, calling my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, called her and my mom. And I was like, Mom, I don't know what I can do for tomorrow. I can't see anything like that. And they end up coming up from Omaha at about 4 a.m. We end up going to the emergency room and they did some tests and see my vision and things like that. My vision was good, but I kind of lied and said I was able to see, to play. And
okay,
then
so you're hearing this because of course now there's more influence and more dedication to the right of the player more than it is just what you say. So did you feel like what were you trying to overcome by saying that you're seeing some things? What was some of the struggles that you were thinking of at that time?
Kind of take a step backwards. That my senior, I ended up twisting my ankle against Omaha Gross in the exhibition game. So I didn't play our first game of the year, and we end up losing. I think we were preseason number 2 or 3 at the time, and I didn't play that first game. We ended up dropping that first game, and I was like, "There's no way, I'm gonna miss my first game and my last game my senior year. There's no way." So I did anything I could, put a little bit of Epsom salt, and that was it. That was that.
I think you still come out and drop double figures.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, we double figures even. Man, I have nightmares about that game still to this day. I'm like, man. And a lot of our, guys who played at Central, there was, friends growing up, and I'm like, we still talk about this still today. So
See, and that's what I like to hear is, and a lot of our stories is trying to bring, local athletes, coaches, players, recruiters, people that see the game at a whole different level, but also know some of the struggles, some of the things that you had to overcome. Obviously, thinking of your senior year, and I only say it because my daughter's going through it now. What was it like mentally? What was some of the challenges there? Because, there's a thing called FOM or fear of missing out, right? You don't want to miss those opportunities, especially if you're trying to play at the next level. What was mentally?
Mentally, it was, it was just the guys that you grew up with, playing AAU stuff and then being able to play it on that big of a stage at the time. I couldn't think of a reason why not to play. So.
And when you speak of AAU from when you played to now, what is one of the biggest things that you, besides the cost?
That too. Social media. God, as far as, a couple retweets here, a couple shares here, a quick little clip, not discrediting, the talent now. It's crazy on, even 10 years removed, but I think AAU was, social media for sure. I think if we had some social media, a couple of guys that we grew up with would be, playing on the big stage as well. So social media was a great resource that I wish we would have had. I know my sophomore year of high school, Huddle just came out. So that was pretty good for us as well. I know Coach Cannon had a bunch of different VCRs and DVDs, things like that. So the resources for sure on social media is really big this year.
And of course, when you were covering the sports back when he was playing, what was some of the things? Was it easier to get into facilities? Was it harder now? What's the difference between then and now?
I do think it was easier to get into facilities. Of course, the backlash, not the backlash, but the some of the negative aspects of social media, that it's a positive now for somebody like myself, because kids want exposure, right? So you're trying to get their name out there. You're trying to give them a name, give them a voice, and let them be seen, which is a lot easier now than it was back then. So I think Coach Gullie does a great job of it. He's on social media, that pretty consistently.
I try to.
And these young kids, they use these platforms in a pretty positive way. Making sure their profiles are right. They have contact information. Those things are important for kids nowadays.
Now, Brian, you run a facility where you see kids in and out. Obviously, some of them try to share videos when they're at your facility of achievements. Is there any talk that you do at your level to the kids to make them understand what they're really showing and what should be shown?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good things and negative things that come with social media, but the best thing is just being able to connect with coaches across the country. If you want to play at a higher level, college baseball, I'm sure basketball, there's probably a home out there for you. It's just a matter of getting seen by the right person at the right time. So, I mean, you can go to someone's profile and see like a complete history of everything they've done. Here's what they looked like their freshman year, sophomore year. Here's the, them making progress year over year. So, your social media really can give you a good history of the player and what their character's like and what they're doing outside of basketball or baseball as well.
But with that too, it can lead to a little trickery by some people. So sometimes the kids can see profiles of people reaching out to them that aren't necessarily legitimate. So they have to be careful of that as well. So that's one of the negatives.
Yeah.
There are a lot of positives with connectivity.
I tell people it's your ticket to get in.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Like it's your ticket to get seen and get in. And then, once you're in, then a coach can come look at you. And obviously they're going to come watch you at some time,
Right.
but you doing certain things, showing certain things and get you into the party for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So of course we got coach coming up through his own school. After school, what's your next plan? Because I know it wasn't just coming right back to where you are today.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm just enjoying every moment. I can't complain. I can't even look in the future just where I'm at right now. Obviously, I do want to take a step up eventually, but right now I'm just enjoying the moment, especially, this is where, I grew up and this, I grew up in Bellevue or in Omaha, South Omaha. So, which is a little bit, south of Harrison, but, I'm just enjoying the moment right now. So.
Awesome. And then, of course, I know I saw you doing a little bit of refereeing. So before you get into the coaching part, before we get into that, and I only ask it because obviously, Brian, you're a sports guy who sees umpires' inconsistency. Being a guy who loves the game, refs the game, and you have these parents behind you, how are you able to overcome some of those?
Man, I love it. I mean, it's just another challenge for me, and also just being somewhere where I can impact the game in any which way, rather it be, doing book, rather it be doing clock, rather it be in, coaching, playing, anything like that, and when I graduated college, I didn't know if I wanted to coach at all. So, but I know I wanted to be a part of the game, and, I started reffing, and I thought that was a pretty good challenge. But, you do get some crazy parents at 8 a.m. at a third grade game. That's on your neck for sure. But, I like that challenge, and I try my best to try to help the kids out a little bit. And it's kind of funny too, of the people who ref our games while I'm coaching. Now I'm their partner, that morning. And, there's times like, you was kind of talking to me a little crazy.
See, that's what I try to make sure people understand.
I didn't mean to. I'm trying to coach with some passion. It wasn't directly towards you, but, I try my best to be respectful as possible and also try to set a good example for my players, but at the same time, being one of the bad guys with the refs is definitely eye-opening at 8 a.m. for sure.
And then for you, David, of course, you see the referees, you see possibly some inconsistency. Being someone that looks at the recruits, is a judgment for you based on how a kid reacts and how they can overcome that challenge?
Me personally, I would say no for me. I mean, obviously there are the actions that people can take that are overboard.
But wouldn't you want to paint that picture kind of for a coach? I mean, if you're really trying to give the details I know one thing when I ref is I love when coaches, and I've refed all the way up to 8th grade, like the gold division. Of course, you're running your butt off. But I love that the coaches that are the ones that go, you've got to adjust just because it wasn't called on the last ref. So seeing how these kids can mentally break down, I just didn't know if recruiting, if that takes effect. And the only reason I say it is because if I'm looking at your review, I'm going to go, okay, is there anything that can kind of tell me this is a kid that would fit my flavor, my style? Right. Or am I the coach that's up the ref's butt and I don't care what my kid does? Just some of that aspect.
Yeah, I think some of it depends, right? So, I think at least one thing I've learned from being a scout is interaction with the coach can tell you a lot about a player, because they can tell you about the character more than what the game can on the court sometimes. Because when you get, as you probably both know, when you're in the midst of a competition, sometimes it's easy to lose your head, right? And interacting with the coaches is very important because, first time I spoke with Gullie, I met with him on Lamb Kuani, and what you could tell, and one of the things I really liked about the coach was he's invested in giving back to the kids and the game. So when he talked about Lamb, it wasn't just about his game. Lamb at the time was second in state in scoring, had no offers, And he was committed to trying to work with him to get those offers. And then not only that, he was talking to me about what he's doing in the classroom. I don't know if a lot of people know, but Gullie himself was an academic All-American, at least All-State, right? Yep. And even at the NAIA level when he played. So those things, players can be reflections of the coach. So when you look at programs, I think a lot of those character things that you're kind of discussing happen. I learn more about the player through communications with those coaches.
Gotcha. And then, of course, when we look through the college, how did that experience go? What's some things that you took from your college? Where did you go? And what was some things that you took to the next level?
I went to Midland, played under Coach Eisner and Coach Lowick at the time, graduated in 2015. But the things that I took away from, you got to be committed for sure. Yeah. There's times where I'm calling my mom, I'm like, yo, Mom, Coach Eisner is completely different from Coach Cannon. But it kind of challenges your mental and you got to kind of look in the mirror and say, hey, is this really for you? Is this really what you want? If you want to do it, take that challenge and what can you do to be better? What are you doing? That's causing Coach Eisner to yell at you, being on your tail the most times. So.
Well, and I like that. So we've all played some sports. We've all been some. Where do you think is a good age, Brian, especially now you're coaching your son, that you feel is the age that the expectation should start raising to get him closer to college? Because like you said, seeing what Coach Cannon did, great coach, historical coach in the area, but then to compare it to just the NAIA, what's some things that you're noticing? And when do you think is going to be a good time to tighten that belt down?
I think junior high probably is a good age. Kind of right before you get into high school is usually we see kids are growing differently. But man, even there's some kids that are younger, I would say, that like my 9-year-old right now, all he wants to do is baseball. He's already talking about playing college and stuff. So I think it varies per kid, but I think mostly probably when you say junior high is we can start, seeing kids get a little bit more competitive, bodies changing, all that stuff. They get after a little bit more.
Well, and he mentioned, obviously being from OPS, I coached at Omaha South. Some of the things that I feel that he's talking about is just sometimes it's hard for a coach to have a higher expectation at these schools where the numbers just aren't there. You're not the Bellevue West where you're cutting 22. You're hoping to keep all 32 and have 3 competible teams. Right. When you look at that, do you feel like, is that a disservice by a coach, or do you feel like sometimes they have to adapt to the atmosphere that's around them?
I think it's more of an adapt, but, I was kind of raised on from my parents and, my coaches and the people who mentored me. Whatever you do, you always want to be the best. I'm just going to be honest. No matter where you're at, no matter if you're freaking anywhere, you want to compete with those guys. You want to put your name up there. You want to be in that same sentence with those top teams. So, I tell our guys, hey, you came to Bryan, you trusted me, and let's make a path for yourselves and let's get this completed.
Well, and before we get into the high school part where he's coaching at the high school, Omaha Bryan, let's talk to Amari Bynum here as he talks a little bit about his AAU experience and how it rolls into the high school.
My name is Amari Bynum. I go to Bryan High. The position I play is power forward. I play for Moken Elite. My AAU team, what helps me, is being more vocal on the court. To be more of a leader this year and be more confident.
All right. So he talked a little bit about how you compare and how some things is easier, better. What is your self-comparison, when you look at the AAU coaches that your kids are having to work with?
My comparison towards the AAU coaches?
Yeah.
There's really, there is a little bit of comparison, but I think all of the guys who are playing AAU, we all have that one goal is, to have our guys do the best that they can do. Always compete at a high level, no matter what level you're playing at. So there's really no, this coach said this and, Coach Gullie said this. We all have one specific goal, and I trust every program that my players are playing for. There's really no AAU program that I'm trying to funnel any guys in. Even though I did coach at Team Factory, at one point in time, but for the most part, I trust a lot of the programs that are out here, and I'm glad that there's a little bit more AAU programs. When I was in, when I was in high school. I think when I was in high school, we just had the OSA Crusaders at the time, and then Nebraska Bison, for the most part, was the two top traveling teams at the time. So.
And when you talk about AAU base or basketball, think about baseball here, Brian. When you're looking, I mean, you see big names like the Nebraska prospects. Is AAU starting to overtake any of the select part of it, or do you feel it's a little give and take
on the baseball side?
Yeah.
I mean, there's one travel club in town. It's Nebraska Prospects. Okay. I guess it's a little unique though in the baseball world because we still have Legion baseball. I mean, Nebraska Prospects does a great job of getting kids out there traveling, probably similar to what your top AAU programs do. But then Legion baseball, honestly, is doing a great job and are like just as good as the Prospects in a lot of areas, getting kids like to just different areas of part of the country and getting them to college too. So a little bit different in the baseball world. I think AAU is a little bit.
But you mentioned one thing that I really like is you mentioned the Legion ball, right? So that gives the players who might not be the prospect style, gives them a little more playing time. Has the summer league for high school basketball taken any kind of hit because the AAU trail is picking up? Or do you think it gives you more time to concentrate on the players that you want to be there for you and for that team? And I'm not saying the players that play at AAU don't want to be at Bryan.
Right.
But the opportunities might not arise for the other players.
Not really, because I know the AAU circuit, we have kind of that pause in June. So that's where we have all of our summer leagues. We got a couple showcases this summer, just all in the month of June. I know April and May, we just, a lot of running and lifting and things like that. So, but there are times to where if a kid did not get picked up by a top AAU program, we're working out or something of some sort. So.
Well, and while we talk a little bit more about AAU programs and what the opportunities are, we have Amir Martin here. He plays AAU basketball along with for Coach Gullie over at Omaha Bryan.
My name is Amir Martin. I go to Bryan High. I play point guard and shooting guard, and I play for ECG Midwest. AAU basketball has brought a lot of new connections to me. The opportunity to travel all across the world, opportunity to play with a lot of people that's really good. The level of playing is very high. A little different from high school, regular high school basketball. I really worked hard enough to play for this really good team, because that team, it's a lot of people in this state and they chose me. So that's a good thing. One thing I learned from Coach Gullie is to believe in myself.
All right. So you've given us two players. Talk a good amount between AAU and high school. You grew up around it. Sometimes there's the should they go, should they stay? How do you feel your guidance to each player goes when it becomes where they should go or what they should be looking for? Because you would want someone to compare to you, right?
Yeah,
or someone
for sure. I would just say go somewhere where you feel valued. Go somewhere where, not always have the biggest role, but where you think that you can grow to whatever you learned or whoever you're going to play with or for that you bring that back to the high school level. I know, when they are playing AAU, they're playing against people all over the country. So, I mean, you're going to have to elevate your game. You're playing against guys that possibly you never heard of, or you're playing against guys that has, 1.5 million followers on Instagram, so I'm just, so
you never know.
Yeah,
you never know.
Yeah. So I'm saying, hey man, you compete, you get the most of any opportunity that you can and bring that back, and kind of tell your story and how you elevate your game on the circuit. I'm gonna need you to elevate your game when we play against local teams. So
tell us more about the competition level, like the quality of like high school teams around here, and then the competition they're playing at like these AAU events.
I mean, it's kind of neck and neck. But as far as Nebraska, I think Nebraska is very underrated, underappreciated from a lot of people who is not from Nebraska. I mean, but we have, it's crazy of the teams that we're putting together from different high schools, and now they're playing against guys who are potentially 5-star guys, 5-star athletes.
Multiple offers.
Yes, you're playing against guys who our 6'9" point guards with a full beard.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the talent in the world is crazy, but
the AAU is kind of a tier,
Yep.
right? So you got your shoe circuits, and there's multiple of them.
Yep.
And then there's even just your national, like OSA has a national team.
Yep.
So they kind of put different players in different positions based on skill levels, along with what type of exposure they believe. Mari's playing for MoCan, which is huge.
Yep.
And then we have our local ETG, which is our own top shoe circuit type team around here that'll be playing come the 24th, 25th over at Iowa West.
Yep.
And Mamir Martin's playing for them. So they have all those different levels that kind of speak to where their skill set's at.
Yep.
So that's definitely a positive thing Nebraska's done in comparison to baseball. You talk about baseball, they only have the prospects.
Yep.
Now they're layering these basketball prospects, and the talent that we have is coming with it.
Yep.
I think it's creating more opportunity for these guys, the need and the want to be better.
Well, and when you talk of these AAU programs and prospects, what is the worry of with open enrollment and kids going to a different
Good question.
A different school just because the summer felt better and it felt different? How do you counteract those things? You're already at a numbers issue, and I don't mean it as a bad thing. It's just OPS, a few schools that are at a number issue. How do you overcome that?
I keep it pretty much up front with them. We built that rapport. We make them feel welcomed. We make this, up at Bryan, it's kind of family oriented. I know my wife is up there. She's the academic lady for us on top of, feeding them, and, our guys love food. So, I mean, but,
food can keep them a little longer.
Yep. So, but it's the little things and letting them know that, hey, this is where I think that you can grow and you can blossom at, and we want to keep you, and I try to let our kids know if they ever want to leave, I don't want them to feel awkward, and I know they're trying to make the best decision for them, but at the same time I want them to know that, I'm be honest, I'm biased, but there ain't no place like Bryan. I mean, it's a small town. I mean, it's out the way, and it's family oriented, and we're here to, create guys play with a chip on their shoulder and something to prove.
Have a little grind.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking for yourself, as far as what's your favorite parts of coverage? Is it some of because AU is kind of a showcase where it's not a lot of team basketball. I mean, you find some teams that know how to play together, but you do find the other teams where it is, let's show and see what I can do and make yourself. What do you have? Do you like the high school rankings over the AAU?
Yeah, I think I prefer the high school scene a little more than the AAU. Ultimately for me, it's always been about, I started doing this more a year and a half ago because, it's not my 9 to 5. It's just a simple passion for wanting to help kids. I don't necessarily get paid a lot of money to do this. So it's really about trying to help them build that platform and showcase Nebraska talent, because beyond basketball, any opportunity to get kids a free education, I'm going to sign up for it. And I'm going to try to do my most to help them get that. So that's really I think that what I enjoy most, whether it's at high school or AAU. I enjoy being in high school stands a little more than the AAU stands. They're a little more comfortable, but I think that's probably what I enjoy the most.
Do you find money's an issue, obviously, for certain families? Do you find more AAU programs working with the families than you find where a kid goes, coach, I really want to play, I just can't? I mean, have you experienced that in your program?
I experienced that. I know a lot of coaches that that I communicate with on the AAU. They always tell me that we don't want money to be an issue on why a kid can't, experience that opportunity or playing at the next level or, playing at that elite competition. So,
and then Bryan, of course, you're seeing all this stuff as your kids are getting closer and closer and closer. What's some of the things that you really enjoy with the program that you're running through, and some of the things that you're like, okay, they're doing it a little different, but I can pull it in for the AAU and help your team?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the program that I see is, just creating better people. not just necessarily the athletes. And, you know, the athlete is second to the character, right? And building up athletes. And, you know, I see so many good people like basketball coaches. We've had 2 or 3 now that I've been a part of, and just listening to them and talking about the family, creating this, like really inspiring. And, you know, I think the money thing, especially for probably the pool that you're pulling in from basketball, is just probably a little bit more unique as well. No, that's great that you guys kind of help those people out. What does like an AAU program cost a family? Like what?
There's some programs I know that's costing like $1,400. And they travel, you know, from Kansas City to Des Moines to Omaha. I know some that are charging right around $1,700. Yeah. I mean,
now this isn't counting the $20 per day.
And you got to think about it where, you know, there's parents that are paying, you know, the entry fee to the tournaments, and then they got 4 or 5.
Why they got to keep getting us on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with no deal, man?
Yeah, so that can get really. And then the concession stands, and even when I'm reffing, I see one kid having nachos and Doritos and candy, and
no coolers,
no coolers.
Right.
I mean, they're there all day. Then they go from UBT to Iowa Fieldhouse, and they got to pay another entry. Yeah. So,
well, I'm glad that you kind of you rose to another talk there. You rose about consumption. Now, obviously, what a high school kid can consume compared to what we can consume now is night and day. What's some of the guidance you can say and you can you advise? The only reason I say this is we had back last year, we had power lifters on, and we thought nutrition would be like high and like talking all this protein, but he is from an OPS school. So we understood that in their budget, you got to be careful how you talk. How does the nutrition part go amongst your team?
My team?
Well,
wife cooking.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, she's always like, hey, what do you want the guys to eat before games? You know what? There's times that, you know, we'll try to get snacks. You know, we'll get like granola bars in the morning and things like that. But I think our biggest weakness is there's a gas station that's right across the street from Bryan.
That crispy chicken or something I heard about. Just heard about it.
Yep. So they go across the street with hot Cheetos and Kool-Aid and Gatorades and all that stuff. So I mean, it's kind of up and down. It's kind of up and down though.
So with you being a recruiting type and promoting the kids, what's one of the kids that you've talked to for Gullie that you've seen not just for 1 year, but now going on and moving on to where they're at today?
You mean at the next level?
It could be at the next level, or even just a junior to a senior, or someone that you've seen grow from some of the things that he's coached.
You know, I think even his top 2 players right now, arguably, but statistically we'll say, are Amir and Amari. So even those 2, you can see the growth within the individuals. We were talking beforehand. I was telling him how surprised I was that Amari led the team in every single category except for steals. He even led in 3-point percentage as a 6'9" big man that primarily could be perceived as more of a post player. And I think that is the growth in his game from 1 year to the next. So even as a freshman, you got a gentleman like one guy that really impressed me last year was Elijah McCullough. You know, I thought, you know, I seen him in the games. I loved his hustle. But then last year, we even had him at an event, and I was enamored by the way that he carried himself and the handles and the confidence that he had. So I feel like that was probably some of the coach, because I think that's the way he probably played. So that kind of rubbed off on Elijah, because the year before I didn't see that not a lot of that confidence like he had last year, where he was more in an attack mode, you know, being like your 4th leading scorer. So that, I think those guys, you got Matt Tutt, who's going to be moving on as well. I think he took from not just a basketball skill, but a leadership role. There was a lot of development from his junior to his senior year and how he was a leader on that team. So multiple ways. And I think that is the benefit of a good coach, is that they can see that in each individual and what they need to work on and kind of continue to build on that. As long as you're invested in them. That's what he does well.
You know, and what I love about this is he's not getting paid to say this about a coach. There's nothing there. There's nothing behind it, but just the actual recruiting part and seeing it. When you hear it, and you reflect on what you've done up to this point, what are those kind of words, and how does it feel like your program's heading?
It's rewarding. It's rewarding because, there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't see, behind the scenes, as far as, the blood, sweat, and tears, them coming early in the morning, them putting in the work. And yeah, I can say, as much as I want, I can come up with the great speeches. I can YouTube some stuff, but at the same time, they meet us in the middle, and it's a 50-50 thing. It's a two-way street. What I tell my guys, I can say whatever I want, but at the end of the day, you guys are wearing the jerseys, you guys are performing, and at the same time, how much work you want to put in, and the results show.
Well, and I'm going to ask both of you real quick, just because you're coaches. Brian, if you think of some situations, what has been so far your best way to change the atmosphere of your team? From Brian Southworth.
Yeah, I think you got to come from a place of love first. It's the athlete sometimes is second to the person, right? If you can inspire a person, build a trusting relationship with them, I think those people are more willing to do anything for you, and you build that trust. And so when you're giving them negative feedback, because I think coaches, we usually give a lot more negative feedback than positive feedback, just from a nature, we just see something that we want to make better. And that's usually what we're communicating. So, if you have that trusting relationship and you're coming from a place of love, I think there's a lot more willing to make those changes and, go to bat for you and compete for you too. So I think that's usually what I like to do and have a good relationship with players.
And Gullie, for you, what is some of the things, if you think of that, obviously he's got a lot of the same words. If you think of it, what's some that you've used to overcome some of those that might not have that same connection as some of your top players?
I would say the same thing. But I'll put a word right before love is tough love. I let them know that, hey, I'm the same coach, that pat you on the back when I feel like you're performing, but I'm the same coach to get on your neck when I feel like you ain't performing to the best on and off the court, rather how you carry yourself in the classroom, how you carry yourself in the hallways. I let people know that, hey man, you are the top 15 of this high school, top 15 guys of this high school representing this high school. So, all eyes are on you. And we kind of piggyback off the social media thing that, a lot of people are watching you. The things that somebody who's just walking the hallways who aren't involved in anything can get away with, something that you can't get away with. So you always got to, hold yourself to a higher expectation.
You brought up the hallway. How do you get them over the negative hallway? For losses, for you're not in the championship game, you're not this team.
I just tell them, my wife tells me this all the time. But I just tell them, don't take criticism from somebody you don't take advice from, or you don't ask advice from. So, if people are in the hallway kind of giving you crap, kind of ignore it and kind of use that as motivation. But for the most part, the people that are in our hallway is always encouraging. They might talk us a little stuff here and there, but for the most part, it's like, yo, Amir, yo, Amari, I need to see you guys down in Lincoln next year, and I feel like, that's the family that we, kind of grew up with at Bryan High School. You see our basketball guys at soccer games, you see them at volleyball games, and then it's vice versa. So
I think that's the big key point that you made, was the support of cross sports, being able to just hang out and be brothers on and off the court. I think it's so hard nowadays because everything is so fast. Phones, get home. You're barely home for an hour. You might have enough time to eat. You might have enough time to do one work. Those are the moments that hopefully they'll remember forever. If you look back at some of the coaches that you've been around and you think of Coach Cannon, what's some of the things that Coach Cannon does that you see kind of going for Coach Gullie?
I think it's the same. It's the investment in the individual. I think that's I had the pleasure of interviewing and talking to Coach Cannon a couple of times. And I think what you constantly see from him is his understanding of each individual. So I'll give you an example. So one time I went to a practice. I was going to talk to David Harmon after, and we were just kind of chatting, and then Neil Mosser comes up and he was talking to me, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Hey Neil, don't go partying tonight over at this person's house," and so on, and Neil's just like laughing, and just that personal investment, and I think that's the same thing that Gullie does. Is it's not just a matter of giving back to the game; it's giving back to the person and trying to make them better and unique individuals.
No, I like that because, I mean, you're thinking of the legacy of Cannon.
Yep.
I mean, that's constantly a word that's thrown out. What's going to be the legacy of Gullie? What's going to be different about you that maybe you didn't get when you were in high school?
About me is just, once I leave and set that imprint there, I want them to know that not only am I getting some dubs here, that's kind of the ending goal, but he left the imprint on students. There's times to where, if I'm absent from school or I took a day off because, my kids are sick, everybody knows that I'm gone. I kind of want to set that imprint, to let people know that, I'm here for a long time, so.
And I'm not moving.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll get you guys out on this. NIL is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Transfer portal, huge.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have these talks? You're dealing with high school players.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're more trying to pump them up, but you still have to have a little bit of knowledge of opportunities that could be a downfall over their actual goal. What's some things that you see on the transfer portal, NIL?
I don't even know if I can really comment too much on it. I think maybe the good thing with the OPS, in general now is the open enrollment. Because that, believe it or not, they have their own version of a transfer portal that goes on now. You see these big schools pulling from, I don't know if Coach Gullie's had the opportunity to have the luxury of the Bellevue West and Millard North and these that just kind of pick from a litter of kids on occasion. But, I think he's building toward that way. So I do think that for me, what I'm seeing at least internally is that at least is giving them the idea or the ability to kind of experience some of that ability to kind of choose. And hopefully that will lead to college. As far as the money goes, I can't say that I've talked too much to too many individuals. So I would have to defer maybe to see if coach has any.
I'm still learning the NIL deal for sure. I know the transfer part. I mean, we picked up a couple of transfers as well. And I mean, it's insane right now.
May 1st is a big day.
Yep. May 1st is a big day because after May 1st, they have to sit the 90-day rule. So
Gotcha.
if transfers come in right away, I mean, they can play right away.
As long as they're in before May 1st.
Yep.
Now, let's go on the backside of transfers. Does it ever reflect something negative? Is it a quick out? Sometimes I feel we don't paint the picture that, because I mean, it's well known. If there was a transfer portal in the 90s, we would have never seen 3 national championships for the Huskers.
Yeah.
Just plain and simple.
Probably wouldn't have.
Because the 4th and 5th strings that ended up being first strings left. I mean,
Right.
DB says it all the time. One of Hurrdat Sports' own.
Yep.
He says it all the time. They would have left. How does that make you feel when you think of the transfer portal? And how do you try to make them understand that it isn't just quick and easy?
Right.
The 90 days don't hold them up.
Yep, for sure. I think there's good and bad. I try to go into the impression of they're making a decision that's best for them. I never want them to, ever feel bad for whatever decision that they make, whether it be their decision or parents' decision, things like that. But then also, I try to put into perspective that, we have a lot of coaches that are up and leaving. So, if coaches are able to do that and, players, I feel like can do that if it benefits them. I always try to go so far as, that parent or that player is trying to do something that's best for them at the end of the day.
What's the inside part of that look like? So not the people leaving your team.
Yep.
But what about the people that are looking to come to your team? Like, do you put your eye on somebody and say, I like to run into him?
I was wondering where we're connected.
Yeah. There are times where you're like, gosh, I think that kid's good. But at the same time, if parents do hit me up, I always not, and I'm not saying this just on camera, but I always notify them, does your head coach know? Because I would hate for somebody to do that to me. Even my very first year, as soon as I took the job, at Bryan in April of 2021, there's a parent that hit me up and automatically I said, yes, I want to win. I'm not stupid because I really want you and I know how good your kid is, but does your head coach know? And if they didn't know, then I'd be like, hey, before
Did that catch them off guard?
Yep, it did catch them off guard. And they was like, oh shoot, you're trying to be respectful. You're trying to do it the right way, because me being an assistant coach under Coach T.O., I heard and saw, not necessarily towards him, but I heard and saw other programs like, hey man, this coach is still my kids. Hey man. And I never wanted to be that type of person. I'm just going to be flat honest. Do I want to win? Heck yeah, I want to win, but at the same time, and there are some kids who are like, gosh, yeah, he'd be really good here at Bryan. And I feel like he had blossomed. But at the end of the day, I always want to say, hey, does your head coach know? Is your head coach cool with it? Whatever the case may be, I know you're trying to make a decision that's best for you and your family, but at the same time, I definitely want to win, but I never want to, try to pull out the rug from anybody.
That's the best part about it. Being honest, being real, being upfront. Bryan, lastly here, if you think of your 9U team, how would you use transfer portal? How would you guide your kids and parents? How does that go for you?
Well, yeah,
it's not a transfer portal, but it's the same thing. I want to go to the Storm Chasers. I want to go to this team.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just having this conversation with another coach, and he was like asking me, he's like, man, like when I see your team, like you guys are so close and connected and all your parents are bought in, like, what do you do? And, I think it's just finding the right families and letting them know that, like, hey, if we're not a good fit for you, it's, I'm not going to be hurt by it. Like, if you want to go explore other teams, like, let me know and I'll go help you find a good home. That's a good fit for you. And, we've done that with a couple kids, and I think, families see that. It's like, hey, this isn't the best situation for me because I want to play this position a lot. And I got 3 kids at that position. So let's go find you a team with a good coach that has that, maybe that need on their team. In that. So I think it's just different.
Well, once again, that's another Wired Access podcast with Hurrdat Productions. Once again, just getting a little inside of head coaches, a recruiter, another head coach, all the way down to 9U. Yes, you might have a kid all the way in high school. You might have a kid in middle school. Just remember, there's information out there. Once again, David Gardner, a high school recruiter. We have Mr. Omaha Bryan, head coach Gullie. And then we have Bryan Southworth, and I'm DJ K-Dub Omaha. Thank you.